Welcome to the Creative Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lopez Jr. Follow us on Twitter at CreativeCoach47 and on YouTube at Creative Coaching Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks a bunch for listening. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you taking the time and making the time, Coach, to be on with us. You're in a unique situation there at Virginia Tech. As the general manager, you'll be the first general manager that we have on the podcast. And so I'm just so thankful that you took the time and were agreeable to doing this. Now, I want to start off like I do every podcast, Coach, in that how were you introduced to the game of basketball?
Whew. Wow. So I played a lot of sports growing up as a kid. I was okay, like local good, nothing great. My stepdad, my mom remarried when I was pretty young, and my stepdad was a big basketball player. His whole family were all basketball players. He played Division I. All my uncles played Division I, and so I grew up around it, and they were pretty good. And one of my uncles worked in the NBA in the front office for many years, and so I grew up in that environment. And like I said, I played a lot of sports, baseball, basketball, football, as a kid, but never was never great, just a local guy who loved it. Would always be around it, always wanted to watch games, always wanted to watch the old Knicks with Patrick Ewing and the Bulls and all those battles. And so it was always a love of mine. And it's just one of those things that resonated with me. Everyone has that love, and it was always a love. And I just naturally gravitated to it, but I never really wanted to make it a career. And so being where I'm at now is I could have never have imagined this happening to me. But I did grow up around it, and I was exposed to it at an early age. And I think choosing the career path that I did, it kind of happened organically. I know everyone's got a different path. Some people play the game. Some people naturally get into coaching. That wasn't for me. That didn't happen. So it just kind of organically happened because of some of the choices that I made in my life.
Yeah, that's great, Coach. You talk about those old Knicks Bulls rivalry, man. I was glued to the TV for those. John Starks picking on Michael Jordan, Hubert Davis, even Doc Rivers at one point, bringing up the ball like an old man. I mean, Mason. Just those were tough teams, man. Bruisers, Charles Oakley when he jumped ship from Chicago. Those teams were amazing, man. I mean, those teams will never exist again in my mind.
Ever. No. That's a different era, different brand of basketball. It's changed so much, but that kind of informed a lot of my, what people would say is a pro. So I guess when I watch kids and when someone sends me video on someone, it's kind of colored by that lens of what I was used to watching as a kid. So it's when someone says, "Hey, this kid's a pro," and I look at it and I go, I don't know about that one. It was a fun time to grow up. I don't want to, you never want to be the old school guy who thinks his era was the best. But it was obviously a golden era. And in particular, where I'm from in New York City, there were a lot of really good players coming up around that time. You had Lamar Odom, Stephon Marbury, guys like Shaheem Holloway, guys who were really good players at that time, all in the city at once. Felipe Lopez, I could go on and on and on and on on our test. So it was kind of like a golden era in New York City at that time. So there was a lot of really good players coming up in the game at that time. So basketball would always be number one in New York City, in my opinion.
For sure. That's why the Gardens of the Mecca, right? All those type of things, God, Sham God. All that, man. Like that was my guy back then, trying to do that, whatever crossover that is, right? Good stuff, man. Now, your experience with those who coached you, what was that like coming up? Like, Because yeah, you said it happened organically going to the coaching world. What was
Yeah,
it like for you? What was your experience with coaches?
I think, growing up as a kid, I always naturally gravitated. I was always the guy who was trying to coach even when he was playing, even in like youth leagues and things like that.
Yeah,
I always naturally gravitated towards the IQ part of it, and just coaching in general,
yeah,
being a motivator, being there for people, encouraging people. I was always that amongst my peer group and my friends. And so I don't, when I think back about it now, I don't know if I did want to coach, but I was always coaching in some capacity. Just that's just who I am, and
yeah,
what my life has been. But like I said, I didn't go that path, and so um, I moved out of New York. I moved out west to Utah to go to school. And in the process of doing that, I started a nonprofit for children, and we would go out and do camps and clinics in communities that were underserved.
yeah,
And through doing that, I started to kind of get into basketball again, and from a different standpoint, right? Like, I was running my own organization. I had to hire guys, former players. We would go around, and we did a lot of stuff in Native American communities on reservations, but we would do stuff all over. I did something one time in Harlem for a youth group. So there was a lot of traveling. There was a lot of um, just kind of overseeing things, and being a leader of an organization, but also getting out there in the community, being with the kids, um, hands-on coaching, clinics type stuff. And so that's kind of when it started to click for me. When it was like, man, I this is pretty fun. But again, it wasn't anything that I did because I wanted to coach. It just was something that was a passion for me, which was to help and give back. And I was still trying to figure out my own life, like what I wanted to
mhm,
do. I wasn't quite sure. So
yeah,
um, in those moments, I had people that I would reach out to who were mentors to me. Some of them were coaches, some of them weren't. Some of them were just people in business. Some of them, anyone I can get ideas from. And I was lucky enough to connect with Magic Johnson
wow,
through a bunch of different people. And he kind of helped the little organization that we did have, just with some gear and some advice, and just some good PR, that we were kind of moving in the right direction. So that was
yeah.
pretty positive for me at that time.
Yeah, that's great, coach. You mentioned your work with the Native American kids, and I watched that off the res
Oh wow.
documentary, man, and it really was something that was eye catching because I seen a different one before, and the dynamic of the Native American people as far as on the reservation and how that all goes, and going from that to a big city, even like Portland, and that
Hmm.
whole story and that whole journey was very captivating, especially for me as a father of four daughters, and two of them play right now, three of them play right now, but two high schoolers right now, and so I kind of put my daughters in that coming from here again situation where it's like they're depending on what your background is, they're not really recruiting you or looking at you because your last name, where you come from, things like that. And so it was really, really a great documentary,
Thanks.
a powerful one, to be honest. And
Thank
and
you.
I know you had a hand in that, so I really do
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thank you. I did. It was pretty cool, to kind of put that together, and that's probably another podcast worth of stories. But
Yeah,
yeah, that was a blessing. I didn't, again, like I said, that was another thing that kind of fell into my lap. I didn't go into it thinking, oh man, I'm gonna make a movie, it's gonna win awards. Um, it just kind of happened organically.
yeah,
The guy who directed the film, Jonathan Hawk, he made Through the Fire for Telfair.
yeah,
He's done a bunch of award-winning 30 for 30 documentaries, and his director of photography is a kid who went to Lincoln, which is where I went in Brooklyn, and
yeah,
we all kind of knew each other. And I said, hey, by the way, I met these girls. They were in, I think Shoni was maybe in seventh grade at the time, and I met her family, and I was like, man, this girl's gonna be really good. And I stayed in touch with them, and then as she started to get better, it started to hit me as an idea. And so John and I got together, and we were lucky enough to put it together along with Kelly Ripper and her husband who financed it.
That's fantastic, coach. Now, yeah, New York is a place to be, right? I guess everybody's connected, and you talk about Bassie and all them, and it's a really, really cool. That I love his that doc was fantastic. I'm
Really
a
good.
big doc head. Like I watch a lot of docs, and so it's really, really cool stuff. But yeah, off the res, I recommend it to anybody who's
Thank you.
listening or watching right now. I really would. It's dynamic. It's got its ups and its downs and its twists and turns to a degree. And I just really, really did appreciate that whole work and that body. Now, Coach, I want to ask you, what was your welcome to coaching moment? Like that moment where you're like, man, I'm not a player anymore. Here I am. Like this is serious. Yeah,
I
this
I'll,
is it.
I distinctly remember it, and I don't know how many people remember theirs, but so it's my first year at Utah State. I was first an undergraduate coach and then a graduate manager, but it was my first year. Our first road trip of the season, we're going to Southern Utah to play. Which, if you know anything about Southern Utah, is in Cedar City, is in the middle of nowhere, and
Yeah,
it's rare that Utah State would go to Cedar City to play a game. Typically, you'd buy them and they come up to you, right?
yeah.
So we're going down there, and the week before, our ops guy, Coach Beckert, he's no longer there, but great dude. He still lives in Logan. Coach Beckert's on my behind the whole week. Hey, we got to make sure we pack everything. We got to make sure we get everything. Our coach at the time, Stu Morrill, legend, great coach at Utah State for many years. He was an older guy towards the end of his career. Really, really, really intimidating. 6'8", big dude. But at the time, we didn't have synergy. Everything was DVDs or VHS,
Yeah.
and he was always using this one remote, and this one remote only worked to one DVD player. So if that ever went out, like we couldn't watch film. And
Yeah.
so we're getting ready to load the bus. Coach Becker comes over. He says, "You have the film stuff?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Everything's good." It's a big trunk. It came in a big trunk, and so he said, "Yeah, load it up on the bus." Uh, he's like, "The video equipment's in there." I said, "Okay, fine." We loaded up on the bus, and it's about I don't know, I would say at least 3 hours, maybe four, from Logan to Cedar City, so not close. We get there, and the first thing you do, we unload the bus, we put everything in the meeting room, and we go to have a meal as a group, and then we're going to watch film because we're getting ready to play a game, and so we're getting ready to watch film that night. Well, we go to open up the trunk. Guess what? No
Remote.
DVD, no remote. And so I start freaking out because I'm like, this is my first trip. You guys set
Yeah.
me up. Like, you told me everything was in the trunk and it wasn't. So I freak out. I go to the front desk and I say, "Hey, is there a DVD player that we could use and a remote?" And so, yeah, they say, "Yeah, you can borrow this." So I put it out there, and Stu walks in. He looks at the remote, looks at the DVD player, throws said remote, and tells everybody to get the hell out. We're not watching film, and starts to scream at me. And then I'm like, "Yeah, this is college basketball. Here I am. This is my moment of never ever forget the DVD and coach remote." So here's the funny sidebar to this is, because of that remote was not even in usage anymore. It was like a remote from like years before. So you couldn't even buy it. So I went the minute we got back from the road trip, I went online and went on eBay and tried to find it. Well, I found three of them in Japan that I had to pay like $300 for to ship from Japan to Utah State.
Goodness.
So Utah State, I'm sorry for charging. If you ever wondered what the $300 was for from Japan, that was me buying remotes for Stu Morrill, so I didn't get screamed at again.
You talk about the opposite of one shining moment, right? That was it right there.
That was it for me when I said, "Well, this is a little different now." Getting screamed at by a big 6'8" dude.
Yeah, no, thank God that didn't become commonplace, coach. That's great
No, it's
stuff,
not.
man. Great story. Now, coach, I want to ask you about it's a new era, right? NIL, things of that nature. You sound like a really transformational guy, obviously, to start that nonprofit, go work with underserved communities. uh, doing the work that you do, because it's probably very fulfilling. And so being transformational is one thing. As coaches, we all want to be that. But now in this world of NIL and back and forth, what percentage of coaching would you say right now is transactional?
Oof, man, um, it's tough. It's changed so much in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I think. Look, I'm not one of those coaches who is against kids getting paid or is against sharing the wealth, so to speak. I do think that the players have a right to pursue the things that they're pursuing. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not against it, but it does change the dynamic of things, and it has changed a lot of the way, especially in the last 3 years, how kids kind of take to coaching, how
Yeah.
you can coach them as a coach. And I think everyone's kind of trying to figure it out. It's a new normal, on how to deal with it, because for a lot of people it's changed so much. It's maybe before, like I said, I told you that story about Stu Morrill. And maybe before, you could coach a kid that way, where you can be a little bit tough and have some tough love. And maybe a kid would think about leaving and transferring and be like, I don't know, but he'd be willing to stick it out. And
Yeah.
now, because of tampering, because of NIL, because of a lot of things, you have to make a decision. Are you gonna hold to yourself and hold true as a coach, and push them hard, or are you gonna, there's that moment sometimes in practice where you're like, I'm gonna bite my tongue on this one and let it go. I don't want to piss him
Mhm.
off. He's my best player. And so
Yeah.
I think it affects all of us. And if you think it doesn't, it's not true. You think about it. And it's made things difficult. And I would say, to answer your question, I'm not trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
I would think it's very transactional,
Yeah.
and it always has been, but I think more so now because of the dollar signs attached to it, and everything that's going on.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's other coaches listening and be like, well, maybe at the level he's at, but it is what it is, right? Across the board. And at any
Yeah,
level now, some of these
I mean,
guys
I
are thinking
talked to a
crazy.
friend of mine who's, I'm not going to mention his AAU program, but a pretty prominent AAU program, and we had this conversation the other day, because I asked him the same thing. I said, "Is it that bad at your level as it is for us?" And he's like, "No, same thing. Parents are just as,
Yeah.
they have just as many expectations in terms of, hey, can we travel to this game? Can we do this? Can we do that?" So yeah, it's scaled a little differently, but
Yeah.
the expectations are still the same, and I think people are just as demanding at that level as they are at our level.
Yeah. And sometimes unreasonable. I think
Correct.
that's probably the better word. Demanding
Yes.
and reasonable. I think we've all seen that. And we'll see where it's headed, because it ain't going anywhere, right?
No.
So we'll see where it's headed now. I want to ask you, Coach, about your position as a general manager there at Virginia Tech. What impact do you think overall the general manager position will have moving forward? Because we see more and more programs making room for GMs. What kind of impact do you think it'll have?
So this is a big topic for me.
Mm.
So let me start from the beginning here.
We got time. Don't worry.
Yeah, good. So myself, I'm going to name a few guys here: Matt Abdelmassih, Brian Berg, Luke McKay at Clemson, Berg's at
Yeah.
Ole Miss, Matt is at St. John's. There's a few other guys that we've been acting as general managers for our respective coaches for a long time before there was a title to it, right?
Got it.
Um, we were in each of our respective cases. I think Maddie was chief of staff and an assistant. Berg was the chief of staff and assistant. Luke was an ops guy. I'm an ops guy. And I was an ops guy for a long time. Those were our titles, and we did those jobs. But for our respective bosses, we were also running the program, and we were general managers in a true sense. I think right now the title has gotten people excited because of the connection to the pro league and what it could look like. But at that time, we were functioning in that way. And so to me, and with respect to my job and how I kind of my day to day, maybe a little different than say Buffs at Texas Tech or some of the other guys.
Yeah.
Um, but it's more for me. It's an all encompassing thing, right? It's not just roster management. It's not just NIL and contracts. It's everything. It's being in practice and being able to sit with coach and say, "Hey, coach, I think the guys may need an extra day off, or I think we need to push them a little harder." Or the assistants come to you and say, "Hey, what do you think about getting an extra GA, or maybe we need some more managers," and you going with your head manager or your GA and go out and recruit and go get some more managers. A lot of the stuff that I've done, because I'm such a creative person, has been with social media and marketing. When I was at LSU, when we got there, they were really bad. They were struggling to kind of build some momentum in the student section. And so Coach Wade and I came up with some creative things to drive the student section. And by the end of our time there, they were filling that thing out, and they hadn't seen student section crowds like that since before the time Shaq and Mahmoud and those guys were there. So
Yeah.
there's for me, as a general manager, it's not just roster management or helping our assistants recruit or working together to collaborate and come up with plans on how to build a team, but it's everything. And I think nowadays a lot of the different GMs, depending on where they're at, like Woj is probably more of a fundraising contact, uses international contacts to do things, but I don't know if he's in practice every day. I don't think
Right.
that's his role. Everyone's kind of different. I think, guys like Slater and Corey Evans are very connected in the recruiting world, and are pretty good at what they do. And I don't know how involved they are with the marketing or hiring of strength coaches or other assistants or managers, GAs. I don't know how involved they are in their respective programs. So I think everybody's different. I will
Yeah.
say this: the position is really um sorry. I will say this: the position is really, it's not titled the right way. None of
Yeah.
us are real GMs. And I think
Right.
the future of the position, and what I've been kind of begging for, is to move the position away from the actual team and become part of the administration. And so,
Mm.
in order to make decisions that are GM in nature, it's you have to move away from the team, because at the end of
Right.
the day, the only person who's the real GM in any college basketball program is the head coach.
For
The real
sure.
GM of Virginia Tech is Coach Mike Young. The
Yeah.
real GM of NC State is Will Wade, so
Yeah.
on and so forth. Because it's ultimately the head coach's decision. But in the NBA, obviously, your head coach Spolstra may want one thing, or Tom Thibodeau may want one thing, and the GM may want another. And so it's more of a collaborative thing. And at the end of the day, the GM typically wins out. Well, if he does, and he makes the wrong choice, he can get fired.
Yeah.
So ultimately, for the position to evolve and for the position to become a true GM in nature, it needs to move away from the basketball part of it and not be a part of the staff, but be a part of the administration. And then you can start to, and you're starting to see it in football. Andrew Luck at Stanford is a true GM. He fired their head coach.
Wow.
So I think you're going to start to see it move away like that.
Yeah. No, I think right now, like you're talking about, different people do it in different ways, and it's way more hands-on than probably it needs to be. Because then the relationship aspect of it too might play into to it, from the sense that it's not about principle, it's about relationships. And when I think when you're in a GM role, like a true GM role, uh, you have to be principle. That's it, all principle. Whether your buddy's doing a good job or not, they got to go. They got to go. And kind of that situation, and that, like you're talking about Andrew Luck and things like that. So yeah, I see that. I kind of see how you're casting a kind of a vision for it, and I think that makes sense, a whole lot of sense to me. Now, Coach, I want to ask you about success. what do you consider success? Because I know, wins, losses, keeping your job, all that. But what do you consider success?
Um, I love winning. I don't want to. I think we all do, right?
Yeah,
Winnings, after a win is a lot better than after a loss.
for sure.
Um, but I think as you get a little long in the tooth, and you've been in this profession for a while, I think you tend to value the little moments, the memories, and the kids in particular, the people that you meet.
Yeah,
And we don't ever, especially now, you don't ever get to stay anywhere for too long. If you're at a low to mid major and you're really good, then guess what? You're probably going to go up.
yeah,
If you're at a high major and you're not very good, you're probably going to get fired. So you're never anywhere too long. So to me, the definition of success is how did what impact did you make? What legacy did you leave? And I think what's really cool for me, and what's been cool for me, is a lot of relationships that I've built, and seeing some of the guys that I've hired and grow in this profession. Hearing and getting random messages from some guy who was a student, and came to a game and was like, "Man, hey, you shook my hand, you gave me a T-shirt, or you did this, or you did that for me." Those are the things that I'll always remember, because at some point it's going to stop, right?
yeah,
I think there are a lot of young coaches who are probably listening, or who get into this profession and think, "Yeah, I'm gonna go Division 1 and I'm gonna stay there forever."
hmm,
Um, it doesn't work like that. It's a young
yeah,
man's game, and eventually my time will end, and I want to leave it knowing that I did good for some people. I helped people kind of achieve their dreams, and I left an impact in a positive way. I think that's success for me. The wins and losses are whatever. Those are fun. But it's more about the people that you can impact and the positive experiences that you can pass along to them. That's what matters to me.
I concur, Coach. That's fantastic, and yeah. I mean, this is a relationship business, coaching. If you think otherwise, you're fooling yourself, because relationships are how we get anywhere. Whether it's the team to get to gel and buy in, or your staff to buy in, or you know, down the road, a job opening. It's all about relationships, and so those are super important to foster and keep them healthy. I think that's great, Coach. Now, mentorship, Coach. How important has mentorship been for you as far as along your coaching path? Like, how much have you leaned on mentorship?
Um, Man, so early on at Utah State, I'm still very close to the assistants who were my assistants in my first experience. Like I talked to Coach Duryea just maybe a couple days ago, who's
Yeah,
now at Boise State, but he was a longtime assistant at Utah State. Ended up being the head coach there for a little bit. Um, all those guys I still speak to this day. Like we those were my first assistants. That was my first experience at the Division 1 level, and I learned a lot from those guys. And we still talk to this day. We
yeah,
maintain a relationship, and so for me, it was huge. I wish I had listened a little bit more. I wish I wasn't as arrogant as I was, or as stubborn as I was at that time, because there were a lot of things that they were trying to tell me that um, I didn't quite get. I took it the wrong way. And I think part of that had to do with, when you're a young coach, and you have the older assistants and they tell you, "Hey, I think you should do this, or I think you should do that, or I think you should try this way." You tend to look at it sometimes as, "Man, well, if you knew all that, why are you still here? Like, why aren't you a head coach? Or why you have a little chip on your shoulder." And
yeah,
um, I think I had that. And I think I definitely had that because of who I am. When you're a minority in this profession, and in particular being a Latin one,
yeah,
there were moments where I'd be letting a team into the gym, and other coaches would be like, "Man, is that the janitor?"
yeah,
Or people would ask me, "Hey, what do you coach? Men's soccer or baseball?" And I think I had a chip on my shoulder naturally because of that. And so,
Yeah.
I wish I could have listened a little bit more to those guys, but
Yeah.
mentorship's huge. I always, any job I take, I always try to take on the managers and the GAs to help mentor them. I think that's
Yeah.
a part of it for me. I've hired a bunch of GAs in different positions, and anybody I try to hire, I look out for them as best as I can.
Yeah.
Um, I've helped a lot of people break into this profession, and I'll continue to do so until I can't anymore.
Yeah. That's so ironic what you talked about, coach, about opening up the gym for people, and they're like, "What do you do here?" Right?
Hmm.
You know, I've had teams that were just fantastic, 9 Division 1 prospects on a couple of them, and I walk into the gym, my assistants are 6'5", 6 foot whatever, played former pro players, college players, and I walk in as the head coach and have referees talking to them instead of me because they're looking at me like, "Is he here to clean the place? What's he doing here?" So I completely understand all
Yeah.
that. I've been through it too many times, honestly, and so I get what you're saying because yeah, the Latino coach is still kind of like new to this whole thing, but people are gonna have to get used to it because we're not going anywhere, and we're just people are starting to realize, hey, man, at the playing level, they're picking up traction too. However, at the coaching level, we've always been here. We've just
Hmm.
needed the opportunity. That's all, and so that's starting to happen. So. I think the mentorship part of it is so great because people just hearing that from you can kind of be mentored even by those words and your path and how you've come through it. Now, I want to ask you about how important it is because you talked about taking on GAs and helping people into the business. How important do you think it is to prepare the next generation of coaches for the business? Because we all love the game, but not everybody knows the business. So, how important is that, Coach?
Oh, it's huge. I've always encouraged people to reach out. I've always encouraged people to ask questions. I don't hold anything back. I think sometimes I can come off a little scary because of how upfront I can be about some of the things in our profession. And if you get to know me a little bit, I've told a lot of people do something else. um, because it's really, man, it's a great profession, it's a great business. It's so much fun, but it takes a lot.
Yeah,
It costs a lot, and I think the one thing I try to get through to people is, yeah, I think you watch it from a side, and you think, man, this is great. These coaches make this much money.
yeah,
They can live a great life. But there's a lot of quality of life issues in our profession,
for
and
sure.
I think it's not something that we talk about much. I think the kids themselves, the athletes, have done a great job about making mental health a priority, but we don't tend to do that.
Yeah,
Um, we
at
don't
all.
tend to take care of our health. We don't tend to take care of our mental well-being. I don't think people realize the grind of everybody always talks about, I'm on the grind, I'm on the grind, I'm on the grind. But I don't
Mhm.
think people really understand how difficult it is to, you play a road game, you're constantly on the move. And yeah, you know what? We do, most schools at the Power 4 level, charter flights, but it's a lot easier to do that. But it still takes a lot out of you. If you're playing a game two time zones away, you come home 2 or 3 in the morning, you're back in the office by 8, you didn't sleep much, and you're right back into it and prep for another home game 2 days later. You do that for 3 months, it wears you out.
Yeah,
Um, and so there's a lot of things that we tend to kind of just bury and say, oh, I'll get to it at the end of the year. Well, now there is no end of the year. You have the portal.
yeah,
The minute the season ends, you're trying to bring in kids, you're trying to fill a roster, and then the next
yeah,
thing summer school's here, so you never get a break. And so I think we need to start to prioritize our own health as well. But I try to give people the good, bad, the ugly, and so I've never held back. And so I think it's a huge part of being in this type of position where you can kind of pull people down from below and pull them up,
yeah.
and mentor people and bring them on. So I've always tried to do that.
That's great stuff, Coach. I mean, I think again, the whole point of this podcast is to open up people's eyes to what the real is, right, of the
Mhm.
profession. And I think you just kind of ran it down right there. and that little tidbit of the schedule, like the panache, right? Of like, hey, I'm at a power four. Yeah, but you got to do this, got to do that. It's not, I get up, I go to work, I come back, feed the dog, kiss the family, everybody, it's not that way. And yeah, you're right. Over 3 months, it could feel like 3 years. And then you're getting the off season because there is no off season. You got to re-recruit, portal, all these things. And so it truly
I've
is a
moved.
grind.
Well, not to cut you off, but I
Yeah.
mean, this will be my fourth move in 5 years, and
Wow.
so like I've moved all over the country,
Yeah.
and I think people, yeah, it's great. I get paid probably more than I should, but moving is never a fun thing.
At all.
Packing up and taking all your stuff, and I've got two dogs, and driving here and loading everything in the truck and trying to find a new place to live. And for people who have kids, my son is older, but for people who have little kids and now you're trying to find them new schools, they have to leave their friends. It's very similar to someone who's in the military,
That's right. Yeah.
and the moving around and having to adjust and acclimate. It wears you out, man.
Yeah. No, there's that dynamic and there's that nuance that I think here again, that's why you said it earlier. It's a young man's sport. It really is because, you got to get up and go wherever you're called to go. Otherwise, if you don't take an opportunity, you may not see another one for a while, especially the way things are going right now. The pool of coaches is just getting bigger and bigger because guys are staying in forever for whatever reason, right? Because they have to for the most part, or because they just love the game beyond belief.
I'll tell you what I think it is. I've said this, and it's the reason why I was an assistant coach at Fresno State. I didn't really get a chance to do much because I got into a massive car accident, almost died. But
Wow.
I always wanted to stay ops. I always wanted to stay off the floor because at some point it does end, right? And I've always felt like the more experiences I've had, whether that's marketing, business office, things like that, it allows me to, when it ends and I have to find a real job at some point, and I can't coach or I can't be in basketball. At least my skill set is diversified, so I'm not the 60-year-old guy begging for someone to make me the special assistant to the head coach just to have a job. And so
Wow.
I think I try to tell a lot of the young coaches out here, don't be in such a rush. Like your time will come, but also kind of have a plan for what may happen after the fact. And there's circumstances beyond your control where your head coach may do something and cause everyone in the program to lose their job, and now you may not get back in. So how do you navigate the space? How do you navigate, your bills are not going to go away. What do you do?
Yeah.
um, and so the more skills you have and the more things that you can add to your resume and say, hey, you know what, yeah, I was a coach on the floor, but I also handled our budget. I also handled, some of our marketing, and I hired people, and I had to, put management plans together. And so I think the more stuff you can do in our game that diversifies your skill set, when it eventually ends, you can at least use that to market yourself in a way that a guy who was an assistant for 20 years and never did anything else but coach the team, that's a tough sell.
Yeah, no, it's a tough transition. I think it talked about the co-relation to the military, and it's kind of like that. Once you're out the military, how do you make that adjustment to civilian life, right? And I guess that's kind of the thing in basketball when it comes to an end. How are you going to be a civilian, right?
Correct.
So that's really, really. I'm glad you're saying all this, Coach, because I think it's going to help a lot of people. Now, throughout your career, Coach, what have you learned about yourself? Because we're always teaching the game, we're always working with players, working with people, and we're trying to teach them, right? But what have you learned about yourself, Coach?
Oh man, these are some good questions. Um, I've learned a lot. And I know that's probably cliched. People say that, but I think if you were to talk to anyone who's worked with me, maybe mm, 10 years ago or less, maybe somewhere between 7 to 10 years ago, they would tell you I was a jerk. And
Wow.
I would sit here and tell you, you know what? They were right. I was. I was unrelenting. I didn't want to compromise. I didn't want to budge. Like it was whatever my boss wanted. I was going to do, and I was going to do it come hell or high water. And you were either on our side or you weren't. It was you're either going to be with us or I'm going to war with you. And
Yeah.
I was kind of the point of the spear,
Yeah.
for that particular coach that I worked for. And so it made me not very likable. I've learned that that's not always applicable, and that's there's a time and place for that. I've softened up a lot. I've become a lot more open, in my communication, in how I deal with administrators and how I deal with other guys on staff. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the
Mhm.
imagination. I still have some rough edges, but I've gotten a lot better, and I think I've improved in terms of my communication and in terms of how I deal with people throughout the athletic department, not just on the staff, but just in general.
That's great, coach. Yeah. Your self-awareness is out of control, coach, when you're talking to us and you're talking about yourself, and not very many coaches will talk about themselves like that and being so forthcoming and just like, hey, yeah, I was this, I've done that, and I made mistakes. But that's what this world needs right now out of leadership, is for people to just be very forthcoming about, hey, look, I haven't done things perfect. However, I'm on the right path now, and trying to help people along the way. Pay it forward now.
Yeah,
What's been done for me, and so
sure.
that's fantastic, coach. Now
Well,
we
how
talked.
can you coach your kids?
Yeah,
And we have these expectations of the things that we want our players to kind of do, and if we're not doing it, how can we ask them to do it? And
yeah,
so, I'm always an open book. I'm always
yeah.
going to be as truthful as I possibly can. And good, bad, and different. Whatever anybody thinks, I really don't care. But
There you
um,
go.
I'm gonna always try to tell people the truth.
Yeah, I I say it very often, like you just did right now, coach. And sometimes my wife gets upset, but a lot of times I just don't care, and it's not that I don't care, like I'm dismissive of things. It's just that what can I do? If it comes down to me knowing what the right thing to do is and me trying to just make people happy, then I don't care because I'm gonna do the right thing. And I like that mindset that you have, coach. And it's that stubbornness maybe hurt you in the past, but it's gonna help you in the future. And you're already seeing probably dividends of that. So that's great, coach. Now, we've talked about mental health, so you kind of jumped ahead of that question, which I think is fantastic because you really hit the nail on the head about coaches and how we do not take care of ourselves enough. We want our kids to come in, and it kind of speaks to what you just said. We want our kids to come in like well-oiled machines, and here we are, sputtering in like a jalopy or a gremlin, and that makes no sense whatsoever. It's kind of a contradiction, and I think that's something that we really need to work on as coaches: our mental, our physical, and our emotional health too. So we kind of went over that now. Ultimately, coach, what is your why? Like now, when you look at why you do what you do, because maybe early on it was kind of like, I do this because of this, but now, why do you do what you do?
Um, I think it's evolved over time, like you said. I think
Mhm.
early on, my hubris and my arrogance, because I felt like there weren't a lot of Latin coaches. They're just
Yeah.
still not, but they're a little bit more now. And so for me, it was kind of one of those things where I wanted to do it to kind of show you, here, look, I'm showing you that I can be good, and we can do this. And so I think now it's more about what can I leave? Like, what legacy can I leave? And I think this whole GM thing, for me, I've been talking about GM, and to share a little insight, Will Wade used to always call me the general manager of the program. And it was kind of the first time where people were like, what are you talking about? He's the ops guy. Um,
Yeah.
and so to actually see it now become a position, and it was something that we used to talk about all the time, is kind of my why. Like, how far can I take this thing? How much can I really evolve this position so that the next guys who come after me and the guys after them can really have the power of being a real GM? And so everything that I do now, every step that I try to take is to try to make this position a real position, where you have some power and people who get in it can be responsible with it, of course, but have the opportunity to actually be a real GM like they would in the NBA, and then whether that's graduate to the NBA or do something else with it, totally up to them. But I think my why is to try to really refine this position, and open more doors, and do some creative things with it so that we can not only expand the position but diversify the game and strengthen it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some more international influence. You're seeing all these international players coming over into college now because of NIL. Well, why can't we start to hire more international coaches? And
Yeah.
so I'd like to see some diversification happen. I like to try to push the envelope. And so for me, the why is just creating a legacy and leaving some crumbs for other people to pick up and build on.
That's fantastic, coach. I like that a whole lot because you're somewhat of a trailblazer right now. You and like guys like Buff, like you talked about there at Texas Tech, and you talk about Will Wade. Like Will Wade is like my guy. Like love Will, love his attitude, love his kind of approach to things. Brandon Chambers, two great guys right there. And I think when you're talking about what you're able to do with the position, trailblazer. You came out at an opportune time in this position. I think when I see it, I'm thinking, man, this is so new. A lot of things can come of it. A lot of good things can come of it because there's so many moving parts now, so many people involved now, and there's so much money involved now. And I think the more guardrails we can kind of put up for people, and I think the GM has that ability to take obstacles out of the way, but also provide guardrails so that people don't go off the rails and hurt themselves or other people. And so I think that's one of the ways a position can grow too. Is you're kind of a watcher and a seer over the program. So I really appreciate you kind of casting vision for even for that position. Now, Coach, I want to ask you my last question. It's always about legacy, and you talk about that. But what would you want to be said of you when your career is all said and done?
Uh, Man, I this game is a beautiful game, and I had my best friend who I've known. We've been good friends since time when we were 14 years old. When Coach DeVries left to Indiana, and I knew I wasn't going to come back to West Virginia. I didn't quite know I was going to Virginia Tech yet. So I had a little bit of a moment. I flew my best friend. He's from New York. I flew him down here to Morgantown. We spent some time together, and we were just talking about how when we were kids in New York, we used to play pickup ball, and just it's crazy for him to think of two of us being kids and sitting down in the park in the middle of the night, and now this is what I've turned my life into. My passion has turned into my career, and and I think, for me, what I would love people to say is two things. One, I was a good person, and two, that I followed my passion, and made it something. No matter where I ended up, no matter if I ended up at Virginia Tech or tiny little NAI school, but I took my passions as far as I could go. I never allowed someone to put me in a box. I never allowed myself to be put in a box. And I think that's the greatest thing that anyone can say about when I'm not doing this anymore. That I did my way, and I did the best I could. I was a good person. I tried to reach down and grab folks and bring them up with me. It's not about the wins and losses. It's not about the money. It's not about any of that stuff. But I think, especially now, like I said, I've changed a lot in the last
Mhm.
5 years after the car accident. But if there's one thing I would really want is for people to understand that I did try to be a good person, for the most part, and just you never know how far this thing can take you.
Yeah.
And to anyone out there who's watching this or listening, like I didn't play it. I didn't have the greatest upbringing. I didn't have all the advantages. I didn't have a lot of things that other people had, and I never let that stop me. I never let it hold me back. I just kept pushing and trying to figure it out. It has cost me a lot. I will say to a lot of the young guys out there who want to do this, who maybe have wives or girlfriends or families and things like that, like don't lose sight of the people who have your back. And I know it's hard, and in particular, it's hard for wives or spouses or girlfriends, whatever. It's hard. It cost me a relationship, and so I've learned from that. But you know, make sure you don't forget those people who were there on your side, because it can get that way. You know, you can get so aggressive in chasing this dream that you forget who's there with you too. So
Wow.
don't ever lose sight of those people, whether it be your kids or your wife or whomever. So that's really the last thing I want to say, because it's a big thing for me.
Coach, I appreciate it so much. I can tell your maturation level, like you talked about, the car accident kind of waking you up to some things, right? And it's amazing how the different experiences we have in life that are like that, where we're so close to death, that we kind of smell the roses now a little bit more. We go back and we say, if I had the opportunity to do this over again or another opportunity to do that, I'd take full advantage of that time, and realizing how precious time is. And I think you've come to that place, and it's great to see that that growth took place. And can't imagine where you'll be at in the next 10, 15, 20 years, coach. So again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, man. Hopefully, I'll be somewhere in Spain or Italy near a beach and drinking a glass of wine, and we can talk about it then.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I tell people all the time, when I'm done coaching, I'm gonna go with one of my buddies who does a lot of stuff overseas like that, and just work with kids. Training kids in Europe to play basketball, then go to the Mediterranean, have some fresh seafood or something like that,
There you
and
go.
then
That's right.
go to sleep and do it all over again the next day.
There you go. That's well, we'll share a bottle of wine then.
Yeah, no, you
On me,
got it. I'm gonna hold you to that, coach.
on me. You got it.
Thanks again, coach.
All right. Take care, man. Thanks. Appreciate it.